We firstly need to identify what that is that we're dealing with to choose the right approach how to deal with it. So what is fear? And I've heard this one really cool story that I will read it to you. So the title is Why Did God Create Evil? A professor at the university asked his students the following question. Everything that exists was created by God. One student bravely answered, Yes, created by God. Did God create everything? A professor asked. Yes, sir, replied the student. The professor asked, If God created everything, then God created evil, since it exists. And according to the principle that our deeds define ourselves, then God is evil. The student became silent after hearing such an answer. The professor was very pleased with himself, boosted the students for proving once again that faith in God is a myth. Another student raised his hand and said, Can I ask you a question, Professor? Of course, replied the professor. The student got up and asked, Professor, is cold a thing? What kind of a question? Of course it exists. Have you ever been cold? Students laughed at the young man's question. The young man answered, Actually, sir, cold doesn't exist. According to the law of physics, what we consider cold is actually the absence of heat. A person or object can be studied on whether it has or transmits energy. Absolute zero or minus 460 degrees is a complete absence of heat. All matter becomes inert and unable to react at this temperature. Cold does not exist. We created these words to describe what we feel in the absence of heat. A student continued, Professor, does darkness exist? Of course it exists. You're wrong again, sir. Darkness does not exist. Darkness is actually the absence of light. We can study the light, but not the darkness. We can use Newton's prism to spread white light across multiple colors and explore the different wavelengths of each color. You can't measure darkness. A simple ray of light can break into the world of darkness and illuminate it. How can you tell how dark a certain place is? You measure how much light is present, isn't it so? Darkness is a term man uses to describe what happens in the absence of light. In the end, the young man asked the professor, Sir, does evil exist? This time it was uncertain. The professor answered, Of course, I said before, we see him every day. Cruelty, numerous crimes and violence through the whole world. These examples are nothing but the manifestation of evil. To this, the student answered, Evil does not exist, sir. Or at least, it does not exist for itself. Evil is simply the absence of God. It is like darkness and cold, a man-made word to describe the absence of God. God did not create evil. Evil is not fate or love, which exists as light and warmth. Evil is the result of absence of divine love in the human heart. It is the kind of cold that comes when there is no heat, or the kind of darkness that comes when there is no light. So fear is the absence of faith. And in the situations where we feel usually fear are the situations that are unknown to us. That's why we fear them, because we don't have any faith in that situation, because we didn't experience it yet in the kind of way, if that makes sense. Because the situation is unknown to us, so we can't really predict the result So we are afraid because we don't know what we will get out of this situation. Will we come out of it alive or not? And I've heard this really cool thing in one of the lectures I've listened to, that the only fear that we have is the fear of death. So whatever we fear, there's always this thing that we fear we will die. So we fear that our loved ones will leave us because we're afraid that we won't make it without love, which sounds a little bit silly, but that's how we feel about it subconsciously. Or if we have fear of spiders, that fear exists only because we think that we will die because of toxic spiders, or we are afraid of height, and we're only afraid of height because we fear that we will fall down and die. So funny. So the only fear that we have really is the fear of death. So fear comes in the unknown situations, and usually when we can't really do anything about that situation, when we give in into our fear, it is because our survival instincts turn on. And why do survival instincts turn on? It is because it is just too much, it is just too much for us to handle. So survival instinct kicks in and we fight or freeze, right? We do something unlogical or we just freeze and we can't really move through that fear. Anyway, if we fight or freeze, we can't move through that fear. If we fight, we just fight it away, right? And we don't really deal with it, and we will fight again when it comes around again. Or when we freeze, we can't really do anything because we are stuck. We freeze, right? And that's when we get stuck in some fears. That's when those fears keep repeating and repeating and repeating because of the intensity of it, because it is too much for us to handle, and we can't handle it because we can't predict the outcome. So we somehow need to prove our bodies, our mind, that we can go through that situation. Because if we will have one memory of going through that situation, then it won't magically go away, but in the next time when we will encounter that same situation, that same fear, we will have then different kind of memory about it. And we will maybe feel fear at first, but then we will remember, one time I went through it. I actually went through it and I was okay and I survived, right? I survived. I didn't die, right? Which sounds a little bit funny and silly when it comes to some situation, but we always fear of that, right? Even if it comes to emotional things. Then we will have this memory and the survival instinct won't turn on because then this situation is already known and we will already feel familiar with it. So we will say, if I made it one time, then maybe I can make it again. And then you won't fight or freeze, but you will be able to go through it again, and it will be a little bit easier, maybe for 1%, 5%, 10%, doesn't matter. And then the third time comes around, and then you will be more familiar with it, and you will say, I went through it one time, and the second time, I bet I can make it again. And it will be easier, and it will be easier, and every time it will be easier until that fear will no longer be there. But the hardest thing is to make that first step, right? To even get conscious that we need to make a step. That's the first step. That's the biggest step and the hardest step, to break out from it, because when we can divide ourselves from a characteristic or some pattern that we have deeply engraved, then this already means that we are the observer, and this already means that we did let go of it, because we can divide ourselves from that. We can recognize that. So that's a major step, right? But then what we want to do is we don't want to get in that fight or freeze survival instinct, because that will make us stuck, right? And again, that happens because of the too intense, too big amount of stress. So it happens because of the intensity of the whole situation. So if we really want to go through it and prove ourselves one time we can do it, then we must dose it right. Then we must lessen the amount of intensity of that situation. And a lot of times our senses are the one that are sensing that something is a danger for us, that something that is unknown is a danger for us, and then this gets us stuck in this whole pattern of survival instincts. So let me tell you a personal story. I had this really big fear of bees, because the only encounter I had with bees was that they stung me, and I was in that situation so many times, especially when I was a kid. So I just knew this one outcome and I was afraid of it. And I didn't know the outcome where there is a bee on your body or near you and the bee doesn't do anything, right? I didn't know that, and I was so afraid to even get close to the bees, right? And then I started to eat raw vegan diet, and mainly based on fruit. So I ate like I still do. So I ate 3 meals of fruits, and then at the end 1 veggie savory meal. So bees love sugar, love fruit, right? And I started to love to eat outside and realize the importance of the environment where we eat. And there it was, like springtime, summertime, and there was a lot of bees around me, especially wanting to try my food, my fully ripe, delicious fruit. And it was kind of ridiculous for me. Why do I fear bees so much? Because if you are okay to them, I bet they won't do anything. But I just couldn't react differently, because I was so afraid that the minute I saw the bee, I just froze or ran away. Like it was like a subconscious reaction almost. And before I could think of different reaction, I already did the subconscious reaction of fighting back or just freezing. So it was very hard to just do the first step. And I realized that if I see where the bee is, then I'm more afraid because I see it coming closer to me. And then I was curious what happens if I take away this sense that was causing me the most stress, that was causing me the most fear. So if I close my eyes, so I won't really see where the bee is. And my mind couldn't then make up all of these stories that would increase my fear, right? And then I was sitting there on the balcony, on the sun, eating my fruit, and when the bees were coming, then I just closed my eyes, took away this sense, so the fear couldn't get increased. And I was just there, I knew that if you're not bad to them, they won't be bad to you. And I keep saying that in my head, something that would comfort me. And I just was sitting there with my eyes closed, and the bee came, but I couldn't see in which direction it was turned, so I couldn't predict where it was going. Was it going upwards or downwards of my arm? and I didn't know what it was doing. And then I was just sitting like that for some time, and then the bee was flying away, and I opened my eyes, and then, I realized, wow, I survived. I'm alive, I didn't get stung by the bee. That's so cool. Like, that's a different outcome that I'm not used to, but, I now experienced it, so I bet I can experience it again. And then the next day came, and I did it again, and I just closed my eyes. And this time I knew that there is a possibility of a positive outcome. And that increased my confidence and increased my faith. I actually started to uncover faith. So the more faith there was, the less fear there was. And then I was there with my eyes closed, and I could sit there more time, and then I could open my eyes but be completely still, and I could then watch the bees, and I could still feel peaceful. And then I progressed, and then I could also move, and I could still have the bees around me, and they were actually on my hands and on my legs and on my body. And then these 2 bee came, and then I was still feeling peaceful with moving, with having my eyes open. And then I was more in that situation, gaining more faith, and then I was so confident in that situation that I could also eat with them, and they would feel so comfortable with me as well, because they sensed the faith. They sensed that I was peaceful around them, and I didn't want to harm them in any way, so they could be peaceful as well. And there we were, best friends, eating our ripe, delicious fruit together. And then they were even on my lips and on my face, and there were like 3 bees at once, and I could be peaceful. I could be fully peaceful. So the recipe to start to overcome our fears is to dose it the right way. If you can't take this dosage, which clearly you can, because that's why we have fears, right? Because we can't deal with that kind of dosage, then just lower it, lower the intensity, and take away maybe 1 sense, maybe 2 senses, and start to overcome it step by step, little by little, gaining little faith, and then adding little more faith, and then adding a little more faith, until there's full faith and no fear. Maybe take away the sense of vision. Maybe take away the sense of hearing, of feeling. A lot of times when we don't feel comfortable or confident in our own skin, it is because we are comparing ourselves to others. So maybe be in that same situation but close your eyes, then you couldn't compare yourself with the others, and then you can compare with the others. Or maybe if you are very reactive and you get angry very quickly, then maybe take away the sense of hearing, right? Because when you hear somebody say those words that really make you angry, then take away the sense of hearing, and maybe be there in that same situation, but close your ears. And then you will prove yourself that, okay, you can be in that same room and not react angry and not be angry. And then prove yourself that again and again and again. And then maybe listen to them half of the way and then don't react. And then you will say, wow, I can listen to them a little bit and don't get angry, right? And then when we make more space also new insights can come, and you can decode this whole situation, figure out what is the opposite of anger then, and how to react differently, and where this anger, where this fear is coming from, or low confidence, because you are in that situation, but you are very present, and only in the present moment we can get the right guidelines, because the past already happened, and we can't build authentic lessons on the past because we were in different kind of state of mind, in different kind of consciousness, and we can't really build lessons on something that doesn't exist, which is the future. But we can gain insights and lessons only from this present moment, because we are approaching it with who we are, so we will get something for who we are right now, and that's what we need. So yeah, maybe try to dose it little by little, step by step. Sometimes we are so impatient and we rush and we skip steps, and then there's a lot of possibilities. We just fall back and we're not really standing stable, as the kids are building towers from toys, and when the toys aren't put together stable, then the whole tower is going from left and right and from left and right, and then it collapses. It's better to have stable toys so the tower will stand. So it's better to go step by step, little by little, so we will stand stable and actually receive it and actually make it a part of ourselves, because we were present in every step. We went through every step, so we won't look back and there won't be anything stopping us, and we will stand there stable. I am really thanking you for investing this time into listening, and wishing you all the best on your journey, and wishing you to overcome those fears, because fears really don't exist. They're the absence of faith, so it's not really logical to invest our energy, our focus, our efforts into fears, because they don't really exist, right? Life is so short to deal with something that doesn't really exist, so it's better to just let it go.